So I'd like to welcome everybody to this exciting seminar that we have going on today. Compliments of FMI and ESEB. We're very excited to be able to have with us once again Jim Shug from FMI, and we're going to give some attendees just a couple of minutes to log in before we actually start the actual webinar today. Jim, you're here with us, correct?
Yes.
Great. So let me give just a little bit of a background of Jim. He's, again, this is a webinar that we've done, I think, for a couple of years now, 2 or 3 years, Jim, correct?
That's right. I think we're going on. This would be our third, I believe.
This is our third, I believe. Yeah, I believe so. So again, I'm Wendy Rogers, and I'm president of ESEB Construction Software. We've had a long history with FMI, dating back many, many years, and we're just so privileged to have James here with us today to give us basically the State of the Union address for our industry. FMI puts together these reports on a yearly basis. We always look forward to having Jim present these to us at the beginning of the year, so we kind of know the trends and what to expect for the coming year, so what happened last year, what we should expect moving forward, and sort of as something that James refers to as Construction 2.0, how the industry is changing. So let me give you a little bit of a background on Jim. Jim is a principal and engagement manager with FMI. It's a management consulting and investment banking company for the engineering and construction industry. With more than a decade of experience as an Army officer, Jim led operations in complex and challenging environments. Some of his roles included strategic planning, training across large organizations, and command with honors. He refined these skills working for a national builder, repeatedly leading his team to successfully integrate operations, sales, and customer service. Today, Jim is passionate about developing customized strategy and best-in-class operations with his clients. He applies practical experience with an in-depth understanding of leading lasting behavioral change in dynamic environments. Jim's background a little bit more. He earned a bachelor's degree in quantitative economics from the United States Military Academy at West Point and a Master of Science in Engineering and Management from the University of Missouri. Jim has completed postgraduate work with Cornell University in achieving competitive advantage and is certified in Lean Six Sigma. He served in leadership positions in various local and national nonprofit industry associations and is frequently invited to speak at industry events. And so with that, Jim, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and we're looking forward to the webinar. Thank you again.
Hey, thanks so much, Wendy. I appreciate it, and I've always enjoyed working with you guys. This is a great opportunity to reach out to folks, and you know, it's hard for me, but hopefully get some dialogue. Actually, the next 45 minutes feels pretty one way, but hopefully through some emails after this and some conversation following, we could get some dialogue about what the market's doing. I typically really enjoy doing this with an audience in front of me. And it's because the market is changing so quickly that, and I think by regions, you're starting to see some fraction change, you might call it. And so really doing this type of thing, I feel like I get back just about as much as any insights I might be able to share with everybody. I can't possibly assume that we're going to solve everybody's problems. I think we've got a good group here on the call today from probably all around the industry. I don't know that we can address everybody's issues. This is probably one of the country's largest and most fragmented industries. But I hope some of the insights provide you all and your companies with some thinking to take back and use as maybe foundational material to develop some strategy, to think about what are we doing and why are we proceeding. I mean, it really seems that we're going to talk about this at a macro level, but your decisions are all made in a micro level. And so as a starting point, maybe, if most of you, or I believe all of you, were able to download the U.S. Markets Construction Overview. If you haven't, shoot me an email. We'll get you a copy. I think you can still find it on eSub's website. You can still download it from there, which I think has been really handy through the couple of years. I find it amazing. So we put pen to paper and reach out across our company, pull that together, and beginning of the fourth quarter of 2014 is about when we have to go to print. And so we do some final touch-ups and edits, and then we go to print at that point. And so it's, roughly speaking, a quarter ago, we had this done. We have one more chance to re-edit it and then stick to it. And I feel the market has changed a lot since we published it. I feel in a quarter, in a bare 3 months, the market has shifted and evolved. And so so hopefully we can talk about some of that. Hopefully we can give you some insight and talk about what we see our clients doing, what we see great companies out in the industry doing to adjust, and the individuals within the organizations to adjust and keep in front of all that change. By the way, I'm out in Phoenix today, so if I'm at the Talking Stick Resort, we're doing a selling skills program, a 3-day program. So if any of you, I didn't get a chance to look at your locations, but if anybody is in Phoenix, you're welcome to stop by. I'll buy you a drink in the orange sky column upstairs. It's a real beautiful view up there. So I'm happy I was able to go from warm to warm. I was able to stay on the southern side of the United States this week because the week prior I was in Wisconsin and New Jersey and some colder climates. And so anyway, hopefully all of you at least can look at pictures of Phoenix because it's beautiful and sunny here. So listen, I think as our let me get this first slide. There we go. To kind of go back and look at 2014, I think it's instrumental because some of these trends that we've talked about are still in place. We like to audit our projections and trends and double check to say, hey, how far off are we? And so we spend a lot of time as partners, and then we spend a lot of time with our research group reaching out to each other to figure out, as I talk to the other partners in our company, hey, what are the trends that we're seeing to pull that together? And so I might see the insides of about 30 different companies across the nation in our industry a year, and that's probably not a big enough sample size. And so what we'll do is kind of pool all our thoughts and get a feel for where things heading. And so again, maybe from an audit perspective, as well as a lead-in towards what we're going to continue to see in 2015. Business, and I think you said it very well, Wendy, construction 2.0 is where we're at. In fact, I've seen somebody out there say construction 3.0. But the nature of business in the industry changes, and there's so much shifting and evolving going on. Big acquisitions, partnering and joint venturing, technology, the adoption curve adjusting very rapidly as we see technology just iterating rapidly across the industry. We're seeing a big change in talent. We're seeing, I kind of see some trend towards a lean around design build or in-housing some engineering services, not yet plans and specs, but some engineering services. So look, all this is the construction industry is fragmented, as you all know. It's very large, and it evolves very quickly. And so in the past, it has evolved slowly, and I think recently, in the past 2-3 years, since the downturn, we've seen a very rapid evolution of the industry. Ownership transfer, there's probably tens of thousands of baby boomers retiring every day, and that trend started around early 2012. And so you've got a lot of business owners that we saw hold out during the downturn, that are now starting to look at, hey, how do we get the value out of the business that we put into it over the years? And so that process is wonderful for those that started the business that have done a good job in creating value. It is sticky and difficult for companies that haven't been as obsessed with creating value within the business and creating bench strength. And so the best type of ownership transfer internally works when you have strong bench strength. With no bench strength or financial capability, sometimes you have to look for an external acquisition or a buyer. And so they like to buy values, they like to buy differentiation in a market, and a company that can make a difference to their portfolio. And so we're starting to see a gain in that ownership transition. And what I find fun is the 60-plus-year-old that's retiring and selling the business doesn't typically happen in 2 years. It's usually in 5 to 10-year, sometimes 12-year process. 5 on the short end. 8 is a good planning factor for an ownership succession, if you want to think that through. And that really occurs financially through the profits of the business, but it also has to occur without disruption to credibility of your employees, of your customers, of your vendors and partners in the business. And so that takes time to do that management succession, not just the financial transaction where we sign a piece of paper, but even that done correctly, we need to have a clear management transition. So many companies are in a state of change as we have a baby boomer type retiring, leaving the business in stages, and we have a newer generation, maybe it's a Gen X, in some cases even Gen Y, a younger, maybe a late 20s, early 30s leader stepping into some of those roles, picking up some of the roles, maybe a business development role that's never existed before. So even the org chart has shifted around companies. The founder maybe did it all, and no longer we're going to have somebody that can do it all. And so we need to kind of split that up among different responsibilities. So within our organizations, we're seeing change, and I find a lot of that is good. We've got a group of 30 folks here in Phoenix learning about selling skills, and they're spending 3 days doing a very deep dive on construction selling skills. Whereas that owner of the business used to stir up work by going to the local restaurant and talking to folks in town, that technique maybe doesn't work as much anymore. And so now this group is getting very, very sophisticated in learning some top-tier, top-end techniques that maybe the company hasn't used before. So I feel like it's part of that ownership transition, that number 2, is helping push change across the industry. It's helping change our structure, change our focus, and then it's really redefining what we think of as leaders. And so this concept of VUCA, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment that we lead in, since the market's changing so rapidly, since 1 minute you don't know if you're a joint venture partner, competing on bid day, you're a subcontractor, it's very hard where the natural competitors in the market now might be your partners. You might be legally signed as an LLC on a project with them. And so now they're your legal partners, whereas you used to compete. That's a shift, and that requires us to change our leadership style. That requires us to be very effective at establishing a clear vision. That it requires us to be a lot more understanding of different backgrounds, of different personality styles, of different communication types, of different perspectives, understanding of the people and the team around us, and able to then create clarity in the situation that we're in. So that almost, I think it's a leader's job, one of the most important roles of a leader today. Given the confusion that we're in the markets, it's that much more important for that leader to set some clarity based off what we do know. And so maybe it's the cost to complete on a project. Maybe it's being very upfront and transparent about how the company's performing currently. So the old days of telling everyone the job is behind the whole time since the job started, and just telling them, hey, yeah, we're losing money, because that was a way to motivate them to work harder. That really doesn't work anymore. That is not an effective way to lead in this market environment. People don't believe you. People can find no real answers. People are very smart and sophisticated, and they can figure out that company's really not losing on that job. And with all the change, people kind of want to know clearly what do we know, and let's be clear and communicate that. Globalization's neat, and this is very recently. I mean, China is really starting to slow down a little bit. We're starting to see China as a country is facing some pivotal decisions about making currency choices or entering a depression. And so China traditionally has been a huge consumer of resources. They have a massive population to consume and provide labor and resources and services. We'll look at China. China appears to be entering recession. That could be an understatement. And China is probably on the brink. China and Russia, both large countries with a lot of needs, but entering a recession. And they've both pulled from Europe goods and services. In fact, the United States has provided goods and services to both of those large countries. You've seen that many countries have set their interest rates to zero. 90% of the industrial world have an interest rate very close to zero, much like the United States. And so as they see the market changing, they no longer can adjust that rate. Instead, they're going to probably adjust the currency rates and do some currency manipulation. And so that could create some form of export challenges as those price of goods in different currencies fluctuate. That could create, for multinational firms, some of you that might work for, think of Procter & Gamble or work for Apple or some of those other big multinational firms. Maybe you do some work for them or are a byproduct of work around them. That means their goods and services are going to fluctuate a whole lot more. And so not only have we seen volatility up till now, we're going to continue to see volatility as they see those price surges swing almost at a moment's notice. When you see these currency wars start across nations, these currency changes, they can happen very rapidly, almost in a way that we call it a currency war, because they're almost battling to make some adjustments and impact each other. This globalization is significant even as we see, given the instability of Europe, who actually seems to be picking up, doing a little bit better than we had thought 3-4 months ago. The instability of Europe, China, Russia, some of those countries have seen a good market here in the United States and have entered it often through acquisition. And in many cases, we've seen them acquire a mid-sized firm here in the United States with great reputation, with solid bench in a metropolitan region, be that California, Texas, D.C., New York, all of those cities we've worked around with, either working directly with or working for the competitors of folks with an international company that entered the market. And that competitive landscape changes significantly if you're one of those players. Often they will get work, they will jump in that market and be a lot more aggressive about pursuing work. I find they often bring some changes to our means and methods, to our process on how work is executed. I think in some cases they will broadside their technology. Will bring the technology that comes over from Europe. Maybe a big enterprise management package will come over with the acquisition. And so that globalization is directly impacts us from our customers as well as our competitors. I was with a group in the Gulf Coast not too long ago. It was about 6 months ago. It was a group of mechanical contractors, 6 different mid-sized companies, and they said they were currently at 30% prefab of their labor. 30% of their labor they now prefabricate in a warehouse-type environment. And in the next 5 years, they expect that they'll be at or over 50%. And what they've realized as they've evolved into this, that one of the key hires they make is to hire somebody with a manufacturing background, a junior manager, a mid-level manager from a manufacturing background, to kind of bring that mindset to construction. And so some of them have evolved. One of the companies said, we don't call it prefab anymore, we call it manufacturing. He said, as you get near the 40% mark, we're really at manufacturing. We're no longer talking about, hey, what will we prefab given these plans and specs? Now it's really, what are we not going to prefab? And so the thought is, it's a fundamental shift in how work is executed. It's a fundamental shift in our labor management. And so when talent is scarce, when it's hard to find great people to work out in the field, we ever want to figure out how to create it inside with a set crew of 20 as well as we can, and then ship it and then slip it in place or snap it together or install modular components or packages, put packages in place rather than in the field, rather than face all of the variability outside in field conditions on site with everything. Instead, let's minimize that by doing as much as we can. It's also typically more cost conscious. It also certainly has some repetitiveness, and so we could create some value in repeating processes, setting some systems up, and having the machinery to do that, the right machinery to do that. We've talked a little bit about labor and talent and how this lost generation, I mean, it seems we've had a boom around the 2005, 6, 7, and that time frame. And then with the downturn, there's recent articles I saw in an Inc. magazine the other day about how Las Vegas is critically short workers and how many of the former construction workers in 2005, 6, and 7 have left for the healthcare industry. They've left to pursue physical therapy as a career. And although the feeling of those workers they interviewed and talked to is that it's a solid market. Their healthcare industry, they feel, is a solid market that's not going to fluctuate as much as construction. The feast or famine perspective that we'll see here in a chart in construction makes it really hard to be predictable and maintain that work-life balance that Gen Y is looking for, the next generation is looking for. So we've lost a big segment of the workforce during that downturn. They haven't returned. I think as wages continue to increase, we're going to attract some of them back, but I think we've lost some of them permanently. I think they'll always look to see if the grass is still greener here, and depending on how long our upturn lasts or our trend continues, will determine how many of those actually come back. But we're really seeing that generation and then the youngest generation that aren't as jazzed about our industry. And so it's a focus point for leaders to find and attract great talent. One comment about that is, as we see the oil and gas market slow down over the recent changes in the market, the oil demand and supply shift has kind of moved the median price from about $80 a barrel to probably something around maybe a set point of $60 to $70 a barrel. I mean, wherever it's going to end up, it kind of fluctuates recently, but I think the set point will no longer be 80. I think the set point is going to be a little close to the 60s. Many different, very, very important drivers for that. It's not just the Saudis. There are a couple of important drivers that will support what's going on there. That's caused in the Gulf states, in the oil and gas markets, that's caused layoffs. And I've seen some of my clients benefit from those layoffs. And so in a way, they've been able to recover some workers from that sector and bring them on board and train them because they were laid off. It's interesting, the expectation for wage growth in December was only like 0.5%. So when you go out to survey people about how much should your wages increase, the thought back in December was 0.5%. I would think they'd say a whole lot more than that, but 0.5%, and today it's up around 2%, and that's really in only 3 months' time. I think employees are recognizing that they've got a lot more value to employers, and so I think the power, the bargaining power, you could call it, has shifted from employers to employees a little bit. And so I think that's an interesting dynamic that's going to hit our market hard on top of the scarcity of talent we have. And so our compensation group continues to do studies about how much wages have increased by position, and they'll focus in on certain markets to understand if you're way out of whack and tolerance and how you pay your folks total compensation versus how the market around you pays their folks. And so it's even more necessary now than ever before, as we see those changes, to make sure that you're paying your people at market or close to market or above market, or you understand at least where you are in relationship to market and how it pays. I mean, you could certainly come up with a strategy to pay a little bit below market and then give them the opportunity to earn the upside, or you could do the opposite, to pay a little bit more if you want to attract people and have not as much as an upside. But at any rate, you need to know, hey, where are we compared to market, and how do we stack up against it so that you don't lose people? That's very expensive when you start to lose key players from your business. We talked about efficiency and productivity, but the focus coming out of the downturn was cost consciousness. It was a lean operations. It was about leaning not only our execution in the field, but our systems internally. If we can save 2 bodies in the office that do payroll and reappoint them somewhere else in the company where they have better use, let's do that. If we can automate some of those systems and processes, we're brilliant to do that. Not only can we argue that it's more efficient, but it's probably more accurate. And so I could get costs, time cards, I could get costs in the system. Some people say same day or same week. That allows you to make better decisions as leaders. And so I think that comes from that efficiency. We've seen a big push coming out of the downturn because of the cost pressures in the market coming out of the downturn. We're starting to see a shift towards selling and getting work now. Not that people have abandoned the cost consciousness or the cost drive. That's still very important. But now there's a little profit margin in the industry, thank God. There's a little bit of profit margin out there. And so it starts to see that folks are now focusing their energies and efforts in the industry around how do we get the right work? How do we create and sell our business, sell the work that we perform? Market factors shaping the construction trade unions, to me, real neat. The unions are at a spot where I would love to work with some of them and take advantage of the opportunity they have in front of them. To me, it's a real neat strategic turning point for many of our unions if they want to take advantage of the opportunity they have. There's such a need for talent in our industry right now. There's such a need for qualified, skilled labor. And right now, the people best positioned to do that and influence that are these unions. And I think you're starting to see some drivers. I was with a gentleman yesterday that does a lot of work in Manhattan and New York City. And he said, listen, if you don't perform, and he's a subcontractor, specialized subcontractor, they do specialized work. He said, look, if you cannot also perform non-union work, you're losing about 25% of revenue. He said, we're union contractors, but we've got to figure out how to be able to perform some non-union work, or else we're going to lose. And that, I wouldn't quote his 25%, but as a statistic, but I do know there's a lot more non-union work in former very union strongholds. And that could be the private spending has increased. Private owners have increased their demand for cheaper prices or reduced prices in this market. And given that, some of them have gone to some of the big private developers in New York City have gone non-union over the past 2-3 years, which is a significant change for a lot of those union contractors. I think you'll still see in some of the big markets, maybe Chicago, New York City, maybe in St. Louis, pick a couple of bigger, more union predominant, you'll still see for the very specialized work, the clients that I work with that are in those markets, some of them union, some non-union, the very specialized work that require very high talent to do high rises downtown Chicago, often I think you're going to still need to rely on concrete workers that come from the union that have that experience, or electricians that come from the union. I think you're still going to see some of that skill is still resonant in that group of folks, and I think that's an easy way to tap into it for an advantage. Some non-union companies that have been able to, over the past 5 years, spin up and develop talent on their own are almost, they're able to match that in some cases and compete. And so this market factors that we see shaping the trade unions is significant. There's some significance for companies on both sides. We talked briefly in the introduction about this design and construction, but more and more contractors are bringing in a professional engineer in-house to do some design assist, design build, if you want to call it that. We're not necessarily stamping drawings, but we sure are speaking the construction language and making sure that we're taking the specs and converting them to how can we do it, and then translating that with the customer and on the ground. And so there's significant values in that. That convergence also carries over to the IPD, the Integrated Project Delivery Method. We're starting to see, and we have in the past 5 years, a trend, IPD as a philosophy. We're starting to see more and more jobs will turn to and consider integrated project delivery as a procurement method, as a legal entity, which really forces the combination of design and construction. And of course, federal spending, all-time low. It's interesting. I think we reflect in the 2015 overview that there is a need for infrastructure across America. Highways, roads, bridges, and even water supply, waste, all that. Somehow we, as consumers of our transportation systems, have tolerated poor infrastructure, potholes and bridges that almost look like they're about to crumble. I don't know how long that will continue. I don't feel like Americans will tolerate poor water supply, though. And so I think it's only a matter of time until some newspaper front cover article about poor discharge process or procedures in drinking water or poor quality drinking water. I think that kind of thing will get attention very quickly and drive funding, be it through private funding or reallocation of current budgets. But I do see, or you hear about a bridge potential collapse or a bridge collapse. That sure does change the political will. Right now, though, I think the political will is not there. The need and the demand is there, but the funding is not. And so we feel that private funding is one way, a public-private partnership is one way to solve some of that. And so politicians, depending on when this happens, if this happens relatively quickly, if there's demand in your market right away for some of those things, they might turn to public-private partnership. If we could continue to build our municipal coffers and our tax base and see a healthy economy, then maybe we can afford to rebuild with bonds, et cetera, with public funding. Some more highlights. Total put in place, you'll see we're sitting around 7%. So it's very positive 2012, 13, 14, and 15. Again, you'll see our industry is typically, construction put in place, has trended with gross domestic product. As you see, that blue line is that GDP. And you'll even see right around 2008, 9, 10, you'll see that blue line dips tiny bit. And blue line dip, you'll see a big dip here in construction around that same time frame. And then you'll see we continue to regain steam. We expect construction put in place to continue at a healthy rate through 2018. We'll continue to see that solid growth. This is one of the first recessions we've had that residential construction didn't lead us out of the recession. And that's why we feel as 2018 is a good marker to say, hey, we feel like we're going to have a solid growth until at least 2018. I don't know. We have to, as rapidly as things are changing, it's very hard to look out beyond 2020 at a macro scale. But we feel like the residential market, construction market picks up. It's continuing to be very solid. Single-family, multifamily continues to remain very strong. And that's lagged. That housing formation continues to grow. I think this past quarter we were at its highest level in 10 years. And if that's a sustained rate, if that continues at such high level, that's a huge benefit to the housing market, to the overall economy, and to all of the associated construction services around it, be that the retail around it, be that the neighborhood and the infrastructure around that housing. So again, this is the first recovery where housing didn't lead the recovery. And so since we were lagged, we think that we're going to continue to see strength coming out of the overall construction economy. Or to be cautious is that as that residential market continues to gain speed, it's going to drain some talent away from the commercial and even the infrastructure power contractors. It's going to. Some folks might prefer to work closer to home, start their own business, and do some work in residential neighborhoods. There's good money to be made in that today, as that's a growing market. We'll continue. Just a couple trend charts. If you're not looking at the Architectural Billing Index, the AIA, it's an association of architects, pulls together members, firms. And if you really see it, anything above that line is positive. It means that they're continuing to see growth in the market. And the most recent one I think published was December 2014. We should be seeing January's. I think today or tomorrow we should see what January's is. And look, all very positive. I mean, it's 55, 56 have been recent numbers. It's all very positive numbers suggesting that there's still a lot of backlog in designing, which means for the next 6 to 9 months, many of us, depending on where you are in the food chain, the construction value chain, many of us will see solid work. We'll continue to see healthy growth. You could tell it's not as high as it was once. We're not in the at the 60 mark, and we're certainly not at the 30 mark. And so you can't see the 60 mark. You can see it was in the 60s before 2007. This chart cuts you off at 2007. Unemployment and employment across the United States has changed, which is also very healthy for our market and for demand. I think we've seen restaurants. I think we're seeing is it restaurants and retail have had one of their best quarters ever. And so that really, there's some people saying that the American consumer is back. Again, some of this, and that if you just base it off of bar and restaurant spending, that may be a good leading indicator. I think we'll continue to see if that's sustainable. Again, as volatile as these things are, that may not be something that we have in place for 3 years. It might have just been a spike over a month or two. And so economists like to kind of watch and study. The big driving trend of that is employment continues to be very high and unemployment rates continue to be very low. And or continue to decrease the unemployment rate. And so that's positive. I think that's a very good overall sign. When we benchmark the national employment against that of the industry, you'll start to see the feast and famine that we experience as an industry. You'll start to see that feast and famine of how when the market or the general economy is poor and unemployment is high, it is very high for our industry. In fact, you could see it peaked over 20% during the recession. And so I think that's what's caused that missing generation. That's caused a generation of folks to leave. Now, we'll start to see this continue to pick up, where I've seen charts where that very last dot on the blue is almost at the red dot. We're starting to see where we're almost matched with the national rate. Keep an eye on inflation, but I think a positive sign of inflation is Yellen at the Federal Reserve is looking at a rate hike around June. The markets seem to be expecting it. All signs are looking that way. And so that's something that's kind of put on your radar to see if this summer, she does maybe June, July, there is some form of rate change. I think that would be healthy. I don't think she's going to jump to 5%, but I do think we're going to see some type of rate change, and I'd like to see the Fed having some of that flexibility. There's talk about, especially if my family likes to listen to conservative radio, as I do for news, but you listen to the commercials on conservative radio, and you might think that inflation is going to be skyrocketing, that we're going to be paying $200 for a loaf of bread, if you listen to all that stuff. And so buy gold is what they'll tell you. I don't, all of those claims really haven't come to fruition. And it doesn't mean it's not never going to, but this overinflation, mass inflation worry hasn't happened, and I hope it doesn't. So I think that the deflation, inflation can be healthy, and so we'll kind of continue to watch for that macro trend. So some forecasts, real gross domestic product, some decline in 2015. Really, we're watching to see the residential market. We'll watch to see what happens there. Gross domestic product changed a little bit because of the overseas markets and how they have shifted. They've had a little bit of a downward trend. Europe, the Greece bailout. Germany taking some more control over their influence across Europe. We're starting to see some slowdown in the consumption outside the United States, which could drive our GDP a little bit and have some impact on what we're producing here in the United States and the rate of production that we've got. So we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown there. Unemployment rate continues to look healthy and decline. The Treasury, not always the best investments, around 3-month bills, probably sitting very close to zero. We'll see what happens when the Fed Reserve changes those rates. Hopefully this will change and we won't have an inverted 3-month, 10-year curve. Let me see if we can find it. So the ENR 400, again, many of you are aware of it or might be on it, near the top or the bottom or the middle. But it's just sometimes misleading. Based purely on revenue, the top 400 companies that report their information to McGraw-Hill become the ENR top 400. And of those firms, if we were to take that group and figure out how much share do they have of total construction put in place, you'll see that continues to increase. In fact, some of the big consolidation we're seeing, 2014 saw AECOM acquire URS, which is massive, AMEC, Foster Wheeler, and more. We've seen some large consolidation. We're starting to see the big projects. I think in 2004 to 2009, there were 87 projects greater than $1 billion. Billion-dollar projects, 87 billion-dollar projects in that 5-year span. And 2004 to 2010 till today, there's over 330 big projects, mega projects. So we're starting to see this total construction put in place consolidation, larger projects. In fact, I feel, and nothing measured, but it's interesting to kind of see some of the bigger firms are getting bigger and the smaller firms are getting a little smaller. I think you're going to see that under 50 employee firm stay at that level. And then I've heard a couple anecdotal comments from clients saying, look, you can't be a $60 billion company anymore. You're either going to be a $30 million company or you're going to be 120, but it's very, very hard to be in that middle in this market, they'll say. And so that makes some sense. That makes some sense. The bigger company often can support a little more overhead and support maybe BIM and support maybe, other services, different financial softwares or different technological implications or impacts. And some of the smaller firms cannot have the same overhead and offer the same value in some cases. And so it's interesting to kind of watch the shift that we're seeing in the market and the work that's put in place. Contractor profits have continued to go up, and you can kind of see the spread here across a couple different varieties of trades. Again, we said, hey, the market has seen growth, and with that, there has been some improvement in any profit margin. That's very healthy. I'd love to see a whole lot more than that. This is the industry average. And so if you were sitting at your 4% profit margin, you're about average with the industry. We wouldn't want you to be that. We'd want to see double that. I mean, we want to see best in class. The industry goes through a whole lot of pain, and so we wouldn't want 4%, 8% for a subcontractor. And I'm just looking at this chart here. For a general contractor, you feel less profit margin than that. You know, the average for a general could be around 2% today, and we'd love to see around 4%. But the goal would be to be above average. The industry has a lot of loss. The industry has a lot of turmoil, and so to be average in our industry is doing a whole lot of risk and doing a lot of work for not a lot of reward, for not a lot of profit margin. Think about this for a general contractor. That's 2 pennies on every dollar of work installed. That's not a great ratio. And so anything we could do to increase or improve that, I think that's a great thing. Overall, we're seeing this profit may start to shrink again, just because the market continues steady growth. And go back to what we've just recently mentioned about labor and the impact of labor costs. Labor costs are rising, and this is not industry specific, but labor costs are rising in our country more quickly than price of goods, which kind of means if that trend continues, we're going to see a decline in profit margin. In other words, that the cost of labor, the cost of goods sold as one component is continuing to grow faster than the price that they can sell that good at, and so the price that we can sell it on the market, the price the market is willing to bear. And so as a result, it kind of will end up with some profit margin compression. And so that I think is going to force companies to go back to the foundational efficiencies and kind of stick with, I told you, we're seeing some folks trend towards getting work and as internal skills. That's been a trend over the past year, and I think we'll see it for another year or so. But as we're starting to continue to see this labor market challenge, people are going to realize that lean operations are not just an effective way to reduce our costs, but to do more with less people. I've got an article published in CFMA. If you're interested, shoot me a message, and I'll send you. It's really, hey, how do we manage in this talent crisis? What are some ways to effectively manage? Not all of it, I don't think any of it is rocket science, but great companies today are investing in their people. They're figuring out we've got to be great at recruiting, retaining, promoting, developing the people we have, and those training, those things were just costs in 2009. Today, they're essential, and companies have strengthened their intern program, their mentor program, their coaching program, their leadership development program. They've created an internal board so that we've got junior leaders getting involved in senior leader decisions to get them involved, to get their ideas, and to keep them passionate about the business. We're starting to see more of those changes because it's important for us retaining and growing our people. I'm happy to send you a slide deck if you're interested. The surety trends continue to be pretty disparate, and so there's, to me, we keep an eye on that and keep a track on surety losses if they're seeing significant loss ratios. But so far, we won't see those results again. We'll probably have another 6 months before we see some results for 2014. Not a huge pattern there to be aware of, or to be trendy to indicate some decisions on your parts. Population growth, you'll kind of continue to see top 5 states population growth. A lot of this traditionally is from immigration. We're starting to hear some United States crackdown on immigration, the trouble, the paperwork. The improvement in the markets in Mexico and South America. So the improvements, the government of Mexico has done a lot to clean it up, done a lot to turn the country around, the economy there. And so we're seeing less and less migration of Mexican workers into the United States because they can stay there or go to another South American country and not have to put up with the same E-Verify and paperwork documentation drill that they used to. So we'll kind of continue to watch that trend. We talked about baby boomers, and it's distinct that we still have 4 different generations working side by side, and that's a tough trend for any of you as leaders. That's a tough thing. Each one of those generations leads a little differently. Each one of them communicates a little differently, and so that's still very difficult. That World War II generation, there's still a small percent of folks. Each one of you could think of 1 or 2 employees probably that you work with that are in their early 70s. The baby boomers are retiring, many of them, and so we're really watching to see the impacts of that on our workforce. That could mean that we've got general superintendents with 30 years experience leaving the industry. That's a tough trend to fight if you are leading a company or dependent on the great value of a 30-year veteran in the industry. And so maybe, again, go back to what systems do we have, what training do we have in place to capture their great ideas. And so maybe it won't take 30 years to get somebody caught up to speed to be that great. Maybe we could figure out how to do that in 10. Hard to replace experience, but maybe we could streamline some of that learning experience and get folks more rapidly growth, I'll think of the word, to move more rapidly along that curve so that they can be a very valuable general superintendent, but it doesn't take 30 years to get there. And so that's a big trend, and we talked about the ownership trend there. I want to hit a couple of the separate markets. Got a couple. Yeah, so this is, to me, big picture when we try to look at the different market segments that we'll see: lodging, office, commercial, healthcare. You really look at the middle of that chart. The middle of that chart is 2015, 2016. You really have a lot of single-digit growth. In some of those, you got single-digit low growth, and some of those you have single-digit high growth. But really, across. Now, this is macro. This is at the United States aggregated level. You'll see multifamily and single-family stay strong, double digits, almost through 2017, which is going to be very good for the economy. We talked about that. And then you see a lot of the other religious, educational, healthcare. We're sitting at 5, 4, sometimes 7%. Nothing sexy, nothing glamorous for you to turn for me to say, all right, let's shift your company completely in this direction because of that statistic. In fact, I think that would be detrimental to your company. This is causing companies to be a little more diverse. And more importantly, I think this is the chart at a national level in a very uncertain market. When we take a look at your market in Phoenix, this looks much different. When we take a look at the healthcare market and digest the healthcare market in Phoenix, I'm just using that example because I'm here, that looks very different. And so I think it's instrumental for us to realize that you've got to define your market clearly and then get in-depth information that allows senior managers to plan and execute penetration strategies to get into that market. So just looking at this aggregated chart, looks like very slow growth across the country. It's not one market where we could jump to today and say, all right, we've got a great business for the next 3 to 5 years. I think it's going to stay very, we all have to stay pretty flexible. You need to know your market, though. And so companies that have in-depth information and insights about their markets are making very good decisions. They're able to command a higher profit margin because they know where that growth is, and they know where they can serve that. So no longer are we a healthcare contractor. That we're really niching. If within the healthcare sector, we're getting very specific into assisted living facilities or in mental institutions or in Alzheimer's units and wards. We're getting very, very, very niched. And that focus is causing folks to now grow a little bit geographically and realize that they have to figure out what markets around them should they grow into. Listen, the rest of these slides will cover the details of forecasts sector by sector. You can kind of see, I'm happy to send you slides that's also in the overview, but you could see total residential construction. You could kind of see single family stays pretty strong up through 2018 and some of the factors that impact it, but a continued healthy pace of 11%. and then you can see kind of the total amount of billions spent in each year. Kind of go lodging. Lodging is lodging and office, depending on the region and the metropolitan area you're in, will see growth. I think they were on the higher end of the single digits, around 7 or 8%. Lodging and retail, as the market economy picks up and consumer picks up, travel, tourism, and business services grow, you're going to see some continuation in some markets. As I travel around the country and see, I mean, some markets there's more hotels than not. There's 10 options for me to choose, and some there's 1 or 2. And so it's real interesting to kind of figure out where those markets are. We're seeing there's actually a utilization rate the hotels all know. And so when I check in, I'll get this line around like I asked, hey, kind of, are we at 30%? And look, we've seen a whole lot of utilization rates in some markets up around the 80, 90 sold out rates. That kind of thing is a good indicator that, yeah, hey, there's probably a need for more lodging and lodging construction. Office construction, like we said, we'll start to see companies grow, although the footprint per employee has decreased. And so there's some measurement around how many square foot does every employee typically get over time. That amount has decreased, and a lot of that's because of laptop space, workspace, work from home, telecommuting, having turnkey offices. We're in cubicles now, very open office infrastructure, which is easier to communicate, some companies believe. And those kind of things are changing the demographics of and the structure of the way office construction looks. And then, of course, many of you involved in the commercial construction. This varies widely depending on where you are. So listen, I want to kind of stop there. A lot of companies have looked at this light industrial or heavy industrial market, and I think manufacturers continue to be a solid market. Although it's a very varied market, you have to understand what side of it you're getting into, be it automotive or agriculture related. You've got to understand where food related. You got to understand where you're at, and there's a whole different way to pursue work for each one of them. Listen, I think hopefully we talked about some general concepts that allowed you each to kind of take ideas back and do some further research. There's a ton of good information on the internet about any one of these markets and trends. I'm happy to send you white papers or any information that we have. But hopefully you could take some of the thoughts around what trends are impacting the context of your market, your company, and then how can you respond? And so I enjoyed talking with you guys. Shoot me emails if you have any questions directly. And Wendy, if we've got time, I'm happy to answer any questions for the group.
Yeah, Jim, why don't you, I think we've got some time on our side. It looks like we've still got most of the people here. So
Good.
yeah, I think questions would be good. One of the questions that can you go back to that commercial construction growth slide? Because I think most of our attendees here are in that space, and maybe we can cover that quickly.
Very good. Yep. There we go. No, hey, thanks for pulling that up. You know, a lot of the spend we're seeing on this commercial side is a lot of repurpose, renovation, tenant infill, and again, it varies directly with what market you're in. And so, you know, a good example is my clients in D.C. know that there's some transportation corridors being built, and so, you know, some ways to do that is target certain areas where you know there's going to be commercial construction in the future. We're starting to see more malls in certain areas and pockets, and then we're starting to see the retail market has shifted just as crazy as the construction market. I think in some ways the retail market, the technology, when you think about, and I would not at all prescribe to the fact that brick and mortar stores are going away forever because it's all going to be bought on Amazon. I don't feel that. I think it's going to look different. I think stores are going to have to act different, but I think that Darwinism is going to force them to be different. So I don't feel like we're ever going to get rid of the mall. I don't think there's an experience that comes that my daughters like to go to shop, and it's not the same as the experience they get when they spend money on Amazon. And so I think we're going to see that, but it's going to be different. And so that's going to require lot more tenant improvement. It's going to require even technology changes, be it for electrical type contractors, changes around how do we disrupt people from their pattern of going to work to stop by a store because they know there's a sale. They got a text alert that there's a sale somewhere, and walk in and try something on and buy it right there. So I think we're going to see a change in the face of retail. We'll see solid growth in commercial construction. It had grown significantly in 2014, about 14%, and then we're going to see continue 8% improvement. So high single digits is a very good sign for the commercial market. I don't know
one other thing, Jim, I was interested in, of course, you know, ESEB, we are construction project management, document control, cloud-based solution for the subcontractor market, so large subs. And you mentioned, you know, of course, prior to this, we were construction claims consultants representing subcontractors all over the country and putting together sort of best practices documentation systems. So, and, you know, considering the fact that most large subcontractors make or break their profits off of their labor, because that's where they are performing things. I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on what you had said about the labor costs now rising much more than, you know, the other costs. If you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so, you know, the more efficient and better we can manage our labor costs, that tends to drive the overall cost of executing the job. And so for large subcontractors, I mean, that to me is why you should earn a higher profit margin. That to me is you take a whole lot more risk. You've got a payroll. Your cash flow processes and procedures need to be very strong because you're making payroll every week or so. You're writing checks to people, whether you collected money or not. And so that sure does drive your internal processes and procedures a lot differently. We've got to figure out how can the company headquarters orient themselves to maximize the efficiency of the field. And that's a hallmark to us when we hear subcontractors say, hey, Jim, we want you guys to come in and fix our field. That could be a bad sign. That's a sign that we feel like all of field improvement and productivity, the weight of that is borne by the foreman, and we don't feel that. We feel that the office, project management staff, how the job is set up from the front end, estimating, all those pieces, and then hand it over to the field. How will we document and acquire materials? I think contractors are starting to evolve into some form of supply chain managers and procurement managers. We're starting to get into some of those skill sets more than we have in the past because they realize that there's great advantage to making sure we have the right things at the right site at the right time, and do that as cost effectively as possible. Maybe it's packaging, maybe it's having them placed in the purchasing contract with our vendors. How much of that should we bear? How much should the vendor bear? Do we have purchasing power? And so there's a ton of that material efficiency that really affects, do we have folks standing around on site waiting for something to happen, waiting for the right material, or they just don't know where the material is on site, or you know, so that purchasing and who controls it. When you think about the foreman and the foreman leading a crew, that foreman has to make sure they've got the information, the tools, the equipment, the materials, on and on. Big buckets of very important items that if one of them is missing, the crew stands around. The foreman has to run to Home Depot or Lowe's or Ferguson to buy a valve, and the crew stands around. And so we're spending a couple $1,000s in payroll when we're going to find a $3 part. So better organization on the front end of that project. And that, like we talked about, maybe it's material acquisition, sequencing, packaging, whatever that looks like, is not only more cost efficient in the purchase of the materials, but it's that the effect is widely felt on your profit margin at the end of the day, because we don't have a crew standing around. I want that crew when they show up to be working and to be efficient. Peter Hewitt kind of started his company years back, kind of studying, hey, does it take 11 guys to do this or 9 to do this? And why does it take only, is there a way to do it with 8? And how do we do that the right way? And I think the founder of the firm would be on site doing the work himself with a crew until they figured out the most effective and efficient way to do it. And Wendy, I mean, you could think about, I've seen adaptations on project sites that have come from operators of equipment, that have come from drivers, from foremen. Maybe no longer do we park a truck square. We've kind of park a truck with a 45-degree angle because we don't have to back up, and it's more safe. It saves us a lot more time. Once it's loaded, they can pull straight out. Just some of that site layout. I've worked extensively with some field leadership to come up with site layout best practices because they realize the impact that's got on their labor costs. And the more efficient and effective we are, not to mention morale. If I set your project team up with a successful project, their morale is going to be great, and they're going to come up with innovative and creative ways to continue solving problems and make that customer happy. If I hand them a pile of trash on the front end, it's real hard to turn that around.
Sure, the whole garbage in, garbage out mentality type of thing. I think that's a very interesting point. And again, also that communication between the field and the office so that we can track that productivity in the field and track the productive hours in the field, and then know on the accounting side what we can bill for and who to communicate. We always have a saying here at ESUB that our subcontractors we don't get paid for the work that we do. We get paid for the work that we document. So and the more people that are the beneficiaries of that documentation, both internally within our organization and then externally in billing, the more our profit and accountability, for that matter, is going to be going up as well. So
companies like yours are in high demand. If we can figure out how to do that as efficiently as possible and accurately as possible, that's the way to go. I mean, that's a smart move for business leaders today, and that's the way to go. Not only we want to reduce our waste in those processes, but we talked about it way up front. Creating clarity for our company is a critical skill for leaders today, and that is clarity. That's clarity in our productivity, clarity in what we're doing on the job. That process of documentation is very important. And when there's cloudiness, boy, that sure does. The field can think that we're making 30% profit on a job, and we're nowhere near it if we're not clear. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah. So again, it's that, more work with less people. If you can kind of automate things, the better. So Jim, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I'm going to sort of wrap this down a little bit for everyone, unless if there are some questions that people want to submit. Go ahead and quickly submit them now. I think we've kind of gone through some of the questions that were there. Again, just real quick update about ESUB. ESUB is a cloud-based project management, document control, time card management solution. We integrate with most of the accounting packages that are out there. We are the only cloud-based solution that is focused specifically on the subcontractor market. And again, our background was as consultants in producing best practices for the subcontractor market and automating those systems and making them available through the cloud via any device in any location so that people aren't working in silos. I want to thank Jim especially, again, for this really, really insightful webinar that he provided today. I know there was so much information, and I feel like, we could have gone on and on, Jim, for quite some time. But again, these slides and a recording of this will be available for all of the attendees or all of the people who registered as well. So we'll get that out. And again, thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Wendy. I enjoyed it.
Really insightful time. And again, you have your contact information up there, Jim, or you had just a moment ago. He's again with FMI, and we appreciate your time today.
Thanks. Y'all take care.
Thank you.